Yo, what's going on everyone? Today we'll cover the meat and bones of last video's topic. For those who didn't watch the last one, we basically went over how most of the population doesn't need a caloric surplus to maximize muscle growth. Today, we'll cover how to manage this approach, how to ensure you're growing, strategies regarding how much to eat, etc. Alright, so first things first, before we begin with literally anything, we need to establish maintenance calories. Why? It's because if we don't establish our maintenance calories, we will most likely end up in a surplus. It's just the sheer amount of calorie dense and tasty food near you that makes us do this. It's like money. Without knowing how much you have left to spend, you'll end up spending over your limit and then have bills you can't pay. Only difference being that the bill here reduces your lifespan and self esteem tremendously. Now, establishing maintenance isn't as straightforward as most of you guys think. Establishing true maintenance calories actually isn't even possible. Because your body constantly changes, and so having a fixed maintenance is unrealistic. What we can find though is a range, an estimate of how much to eat so we can stay as close to true caloric maintenance as possible. Most people just tell you to go on those BMR calculators and establish those as your maintenance calories. Now, while this is a good starting point, it's not nearly as good as establishing maintenance manually. You can start with the calories that calculator gives you. I suggest that you eat at those calories for 2 weeks while doing this next thing. Because without this next thing, basically all your efforts might not even apply and you'll be left wondering, I'm doing everything right. Why am I still gaining fat? So listen up. The next step is keeping your expenditure and food consumption the same. So that means walking the same amount of steps every day, exercising in a fixed cadence, no skipping sessions or doing extra ones, keeping additional cardio if you do any the same, etc. While ideally eating the exact same foods every day. You can have different meals, but those meals themselves should be same every day, both in quantity and ideally in timing too. Although I do understand that this is a little unrealistic, and so if this is not possible, just eat at those calories that the calculator provided you with. Basically, what we have done here is we have standardized intake and expenditure, meaning that now, as long as the other factors like sleep and stress remain constant, the only changes in scale will be caused by either us eating too much or too little. Because in most cases, I wouldn't advise people to cut on expenditure because increased expenditure can allow you to eat just a little bit more food while maintaining a deficit, which will help a ton with energy availability. While constantly monitoring your weight over this 2 week period, if it's up or down by zero point 0.5 pounds and ideally up or down by 0.25 pounds, then the weight you started with, you have established maintenance calories. If this isn't the case though, you can add or subtract some calories depending on the direction in which the scale changed and adjust accordingly. This was step 1, shockingly enough, but fear not because the rest of the steps aren't this hassle inducing. Now that you have established your maintenance calories, you can either subtract 100 to 200 calories from it or just eat at that maintenance. Both is fine. But while doing so, you really want to dial in your logbook tracking. Every exercise that you do, record the reps and the sets. This record keeping of your lifts is just the exact same as recording your income and expenses. Everyone tells you that you should do it, but most people don't do it. Keeping records allows you to zoom out and see how things are going on a longer time horizon than just the day to day. Tracking your lifts will allow you to see your performance week to week and you can see if you have been progressing in your performance or regressing. That's why this is the most important step because this will ensure that you are aware of your performance. Because you cannot improve because you cannot improve what you don't track. Now, it is very important to know that while tracking, you should have your form dialed in because most people, when they log their workouts, just start ego lifting or using a different form than what they started with, just to see consistent progress in the logbook. Prioritize form over session to session progression. I'm not saying for you to not focus on progressing, but don't stress too much if your lifts don't progress every single session, because in most cases, they won't when you are advanced enough or deep enough into a routine program. Now, why am I asking you to do this? Well, this is what is going to help us with ensuring that we are actually gaining muscle. I don't think anybody would disagree with the fact that the strength gain is one of strong I don't think anybody would disagree with the fact that strength gain is one of the strongest indicators of you actually gaining muscle. If you're progressing in weight or reps over time on an exercise, it probably means that you're growing. But this assumes certain things, and without these assumptions, you tracking your workout means nothing. First being that you don't switch things up every single week or every 2 weeks. It's important to run a program or routine for some time in order to build that foundation on which you're going to be making gains on in the future. Because if you change your exercise every week, then sure, you might feel like you're progressing at the speed of light, but it's only just neurological adaptations and not actual hypertrophy. These exact adaptations will be lost when you stop training that exercise, by the way. And the second thing it assumes is good technique. That's why I preface this section by saying that if you're changing your technique to lift more weight to appeal to your mind by seeing progress session to session, it may not feel like too much now, but later down the track, you will end up with problems regarding your mentality about progression in the gym. There's also nuance here though. Don't just use a million internal and external cues and mind muscle connection and all this BS to dial in the perfect technique. I'll make a separate video on lifting technique, but as long as you're stable and you're training only the muscles involved in the action, you're good. The second part of this is important because when you cheat on your form, you're essentially changing the task and the muscles that are being worked. Now, I'll give an example here. When you're training biceps on the preacher curl, if you move your torso and shoulders too much, you'll end up performing some degree of shoulder flexion. Not to mention that moving during an exercise lessens your focus on the muscle being worked, decreasing motor unit recruitment. But by keeping these things constant, you basically ensure that your logbook entries are almost purely based on your performance in the gym. If it starts going down, then we know that we're doing something wrong. But if it's climbing, you can stay in that 100 to 200 calorie deficit or that maintenance all you want. Because it's not like you aren't making gains there. And I can assure you that you'll be making the same gains on a bulk as well. I've tried this myself, and I recommend the non believers to try it for themselves too. Hell, in my experience, I've seen better gains on my cuts. Probably because I'm more mentally dialed in, but it still goes to show that maximally progressing is possible if you keep other variables as constant as possible. Now, a question might arise in your mind. How do we determine what's the maximum growth rate? And knowing this is important because if you're just gaining zero point 0.1 pounds a month, you can be pretty certain that it's just muscle. But I can also say that in 9 on 10 cases, it's not the most you can grow per month. Even as a lifter, even as a natural lifter. However, it is an individualized answer in all honesty. I'll explain the fundamentals here. I'll explain the fundamentals here. If you want tailored advice, just comment and I'll be there to help. I stated in the last video too, but we gain muscle at grams at a time. If you assume someone gains 8 kilos of muscle in a year because they're a beginner, then their growth rate would be what? That's right, about 0.75 kgs a month. You see how that's not anything even noticeable in the short time frames? I mean, if you consume a high sodium meal, your body weight could move more than this within 24 hours. And this is on the higher end. If you've already been training for some time, you can expect even smaller monthly gains. For the trained folks, aiming to gain about a pound and a half per month is reasonable, while for beginners, about a kilo a month, 2.2 pounds for my eagle-headed brothers, is best. Again, this does highly depend on the individual and a bunch of factors. These are just general guidelines. This number could be too low for some and too high for others. That's why another thing that can add that extra layer of surety is visual check-ins. If possible, take a photo every week. Same lighting, same pump, if any. If all other variables as constant as possible. Don't eat too much before and then take the pictures because it will skew the judgment. The best tip I have for this is take a pic. The best tip I have for this is take a picture every morning or night, whichever suits your routine more, 2 to 3 hours after your previous meal. It's the most sustainable approach. Although if you were to dial in the macros and micros of that meal before taking that picture, it'll be the most ideal. Now, once you have that picture taken week to week, you can draw some conclusions from there and try to match them to the scale to doubly ensure that you're on the right track. For example, if you've gained zero point 0.4 pounds in the week, the 1.5 pounds a month I talked about earlier, but when you check your previous week's and this week's picture, you find that you're a little more chubby, then it might be time to slash some calories because you're gaining faster than needed. On the other hand, if you're gaining only zero point 0.2 pounds during the week, but when you assess your pictures, you find yourself bigger visually and maybe even leaner, your sleep is good, your motivation to train is good, and you're progressing in the gym, then you don't need to do anything. You might have felt that the scale isn't going up as fast as recommended, but all other factors match up. Then there's no need to increase calories. Still, if you want, you can try to add an extra 100 to 200 calories and see how that plays out over 3 to 4 weeks. This is one advantage of this method of measuring progress, that if you can experiment on your own self and find solutions catered to your body. However, it's important to keep in mind that when you're assessing these pictures, you want to be as objective as possible. Another pro tip is to just show the pictures side by side to another fitness enthusiast in your circle. It's probably the most objective you'll get. One last thing to assure your mind is tracking weekly weight. This triple security will essentially ensure that you're gaining muscle maximally. Even if you're not, the underlying reasons behind these checks will have been made so consistent that you can try changing one variable and see how things play out. The experimentation thing I talked about a minute ago. This third thing is weekly weight fluctuation. These can also help to ensure that your gaining rate is on point. Just step on the scale daily, and when the week ends, find the average. Do this every week and compare. If it falls within that zero point 0.4 to zero point 0.5 pounds per week gain, then in most cases you're on the right track. For some cases, you might have to switch some things around. For advice on this, I recommend contacting professionals Or you could also comment and I'll help as much as I can. P.S. Before I end this yap with the list of actionable items, one thing that you should keep in mind is that what I am saying here is based on a mix of anecdotes and a bunch of research papers. I can cite them if you want me to, but whenever you're watching educational fitness content, always keep one thing in mind. These are general guidelines. Individual variance is a factor and a major one. That's why the coaching industry exists and makes such a bank. While these general guidelines are very helpful in all circumstances, you want individualized guidance based on your body, routine, history of injuries, if any, genetics, etc. Then I highly recommend you to invest in a coach provided you are serious about this exercise thing and you have the money to spend on yourself. If you want some advice for free though, hit me up and I'll definitely help you out. Alrighty, let's close this YAP session with the practical insights you can implement right as soon as this video ends. Step 1. Maintaining a constant TDEE. First, standardize weekly steps. Then, standardize weekly cardio if you do any. Do you have your training split? Don't miss a day. Boom, expenditure is standardized. Can be measured using literally anything. Aura rings, phones, those fitness watches, Fitbits, I think. Also, maintaining a constant and fixed form of food consumption, similar meals, similar timings, similar micros and macros. These should at least meet the RDIs. Step 2. How to monitor set growth and how to change variables to maximize benefits. A. Logbook. Using progressive overload as a lagging indicator of myofibrillar addition. B. Progress pictures. Standardized progress pictures week after week. C. Fixing a week to week or month to month weight progression scheme based on training age, injuries, frequency, diet, sleep, stress, and other personalized factors. D. Scale, weight fluctuations, weekly averages comparison to determine excess or less calories being supplied to the body than programmed/needed. 8. The gaining should be somewhere in the range of zero point 0.5 to 0.25 pounds per week of gaining, ideally around the 0.25 pounds per week mark. But this could change based on the amount of food consumed, sleep, stress, hormones, etc. But 0.25 pounds per week of gain on the scale is a safe guideline for the average lifter. I hope you found this information helpful. I'll see you all in the next one. If you have any suggestions about what topics I should cover next, please let me know in the comments. Till then, bye bye.